welcome you to Vaught Hemingway Stadium in Oxford, Mississippi.
LSU victorious as the horn sounds, and this one's in the books. Here comes the confetti in purple and gold.
You can unhitch the wagon! Put the ponies in the barn! It is 2:42 p.m. Central Time, and Oklahoma is still the Big 12 champion!
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Tommy Palmer, thanks, and welcome to The Review. We're glad you're listening to us on our host site, Spreaker. There's also Spotify, Apple iTunes, Stitcher Radio, barnburner.ca, SoundCloud, or perhaps you're listening to us on our OSG Sports phone app on your Apple or Android device. John Wilkerson here. There's Phil Canner holding up his phone. And we got a lot to cover today. And we know who the Final Four is in college football. And it's pretty much what we thought it was going to be back in August when we first discussed this. It's
Except
LSU
for when it wasn't
won.
during the season.
Exactly. LSU 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, Oklahoma 4. So let's get with the matchups here, Phil, and I guess just kind of do our ridiculously early view on that. And LSU will play Oklahoma, and the 1 versus 4. Actually, a game I'm kind of looking forward to because I like the offensive explosion of both teams.
Yeah, that should be interesting. And I do want to add too, I'm not sure that LSU is necessarily in that foursome at the beginning of the season, but man, did they turn it around? Did they become a really good team really, really fast? And
well, that offense has just been spectacular.
They just flat out beat the pants off of, being polite, off of Georgia in the SEC championship game, and they looked like a dominant team on both ends of the ball. It's impressive to see what Joe Burrow has done. I think his game they found the perfect offense for him. And I think these are two teams that are, I never thought I would have said this in August, but these are two teams that are frighteningly similar as you look at them today.
Let's say the marriage with Joe Brady and Joe Burrow, Joe Brady being the offensive coordinator at LSU, was a perfect union, as you may, and kind of supplanted by the help of an offensive guru from way back, and that's John Robinson, who was a offensive consultant for Ed Orgeron, and that really became an explosive offense.
And just the fact that Ed Orgeron and Steve Ensinger, who's actually the offensive coordinator, Brady's just the passing game coordinator.
Yeah.
The fact that those two old school coaches were willing to adopt a new philosophy, a new look on offense, and adjust to college. I almost said professional football. College football, the way it's being played as we transition out of the 20-teens into the 2020s, that speaks volumes for them. I mean, that's the game that we played. And again, hearkening back to the SEC championship game, basically you saw what was the SEC in 2012 facing off against what's the SEC in 2019. And the 2019 SEC team, being LSU, beat the 2012 team, which is Georgia. Lots of defense, a little bit of just barely enough offense to win. As it turns out, a lot of offense and just enough defense seems to be the recipe for success these days. Yeah,
and in a way, that's how Oklahoma's built as well. That's what makes this matchup really intriguing, because you got two teams that have very similar makeups. And Oklahoma, to their credit, their defense, well, when they went into that Oklahoma State game, we were a little queasy about what we're going to see against Oklahoma's defense following the Baylor game the first time around. And the defense of Oklahoma really played well against that explosive offense of Oklahoma State. And we saw it again yesterday in Dallas where Baylor's pretty decent defense. Now, it helped when Charlie Brewer went out of the game, but his two backups, I thought, played really well.
But they weren't pressure the whole game.
Right. They were able to, and Jalen Hurts, now that Baylor defense is one of the best in the country, and Jalen Hurts did a great job of navigating through that. So, Oklahoma has gotten better right at the right time. LSU and Oklahoma will play in our home market in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl. So Phil and I will be getting our tickets for that one and enjoying that in early January. But let's talk about the second
over. To quote John Nelson, take the over.
Yes, take the over. Let's talk about the second matchup, Ohio State and Clemson. And what we're going to get there in Glendale, Arizona at the Fiesta Bowl, what we're going to get there are the two best teams right now in college football. I know Clemson's being maligned because they're in a bad conference, but judging from their performances, they did not lay an egg at all against really inferior competition. I thought Virginia played pretty well. Well, that was earlier in the year. I'm talking since maybe mid-October on. They've played inferior competition. Let's call a horse. And they haven't missed a beat. If they've had to beat them by 3 or 4 touchdowns, they have. And Ohio State is just, look, one thing we found out about Ohio State yesterday, they can take a couple of big punches to the mouth and respond big time. And that second half performance by Ohio State was impressive. And it just kind of solidified to me that they might be the best team in college football right now.
Yeah, and I had been going back and forth with that most of the season. I kind of thought at midseason that they were the best team in college football as they were dominating in the Big Ten. I haven't seen a lot to really dissuade me from that opinion. I mean, they just beat the crap out of Michigan in Michigan. And they struggled in that first half with Wisconsin. They weren't sharp. They weren't totally ready for that game. And Wisconsin obviously was, but they've got that extra gear. Really, the only thing that kind of bugs me really with Clemson at this point of the season is Dabo trying to play the disrespect card. Nobody's disrespected them at all. Yeah, they were the number one preseason team, but the number one preseason team never finishes the season number one, first of all. Yeah, that's great. You ran the table, but you ran the table in an inferior conference. You're still in the playoff. And you're favored over Ohio State early on. Mind you, the matchups were just announced right before we recorded this, so that may change over time. But right now, Clemson's an early favorite over Ohio State. And this is the game even more so than LSU-Oklahoma may be the fun game to watch.
No, this one's the game to watch.
This
of the two.
Yeah. This may be the football players' game to watch.
Book your ticket, get to Glendale, Arizona, because this is the game that's going to be. This is big man football. I mean, you got two superior lines going at each other. You've got two superior offenses going against each other. The J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne matchup is intriguing, as well as that quarterback matchup, as well as that matchup between the two lines. I mean, everything about this game is just juicy to watch, and that's appointment television. Going back to the Big Ten championship game, look, Wisconsin came out. They executed their game plan. Jonathan Taylor, who usually has issues running against Ohio State, boy, he did not at all, especially in the first half. And Wisconsin really stunned Ohio State. And again, they took some stunning shots to the mouth, to use a boxing analogy, against Wisconsin. And, I thought that that late first half touchdown by the Badgers, I thought was really a statement by Wisconsin, because they could have just took a knee, but they didn't. They rammed it down the defense of Ohio State, and Ohio State was very wobbly at that time. I'm sure there were some peel painting moments in that Ohio State locker room at halftime about your manhood, and this is what we have accomplished, and you're going to let it go away. And obviously the message got across, because Justin Fields lit it up. J.K. Dobbins did as well. And it was the Ohio State team we've seen all year. And they got it done in Indy and shut out Wisconsin the rest of the way.
Impressive coaching job by Ryan Day to get his guys back, making those adjustments at halftime. I would not surprise me if they had a little bit of a post-Michigan hangover. They didn't really get a whole lot of time to recover from that game.
Yeah.
So that may have slowed them down a little bit, but at the end of the day, when they needed that extra gear, they had it. And that's important. That's really important in college football. I love the coaching job that Ryan Day has done with his team this year.
Yes.
Guy who was not a head coach other than filling in for a couple of games last season for Urban Meyer when he sat out on suspension. He's walked right in, and not only has he kept them at the same level, he's taken them to the next level. And I am really, this even more, well, due to family relationships, I will be sitting down in front of the TV to watch the LSU game versus Oklahoma. But we will also be watching the Clemson-Ohio State game because this is going to be December 28th is going to be one heck of a good day for college football watching.
Yes, it will be. And I'll be right in front for both of them, but Ohio State Clemson is going to get my attention. Okay, when we went into championship weekend, two games I thought were going to be the most competitive of the weekend and turned out to be. That was the Big 12 between Oklahoma and Baylor. We kind of went over that a little bit with OU winning in overtime. Memphis and Cincinnati, to me, was a stellar matchup. It was a rematch of the week before, same venue, with a lot at stake again. And Memphis, who hasn't been able to get over the hump in the American, finally does with a spectacular performance by Antonio Gibson, especially in that last drive for the Tigers, and they win it. And Mike Norvell's last game, which we'll get to a little later in the next block, why that was the case. But hats off to the Memphis Tigers.
That was a great win for Norvell, great win for the university in that football program, getting them to a nice Cotton Bowl game. It wasn't necessarily the prettiest game that anybody's played all season. They struggled. Brady White did not have the most efficient of games, 18 for 40, 253 and a touchdown, but he did what was needed to be done. A touchdown with 1:14 to go for the win. A great win and a really, really good football game between two teams in the American Athletic Conference that may not necessarily get the national attention and respect that they deserve. But if you didn't see that game, you missed out on some damn good football.
Yeah, I think both those programs would do well in an ACC, in a Pac-12, even in a Big 12. I really like the American and what they do football-wise. I think we need to consider those, the American Conference, in with the Power Five. To me, they've proved their strength.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, unfortunately, but that is a really good football league. And, you mentioned Memphis going into the Cotton Bowl. As we tape this, I haven't seen any invitations go out yet or how that's falling. But then, I really think the committee, if they're going to take, obviously Memphis is ranked ahead of Boise State and Appalachian State, all three 12-1. When you look at it, why can't three of them get into the group of six? I mean, I would take Boise, Appalachian, and Memphis over some of these other schools they're going to put in the group of six. And I understand the politics of it all, but it looks like Memphis is going to get that slot because of being higher ranked. But Boise and Appalachian State, they're going to get their shot against the big boys, and they're going to be plenty motivated for that. It's just a shame they're going to be in a lesser bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pick-six game. It's not a bad accomplishment for them, and a good matchup and a good proving ground for them as they're going to be taking on Penn State at Jerry World. I like that game, and another game on December 28th, which is going to be chock full of some really good football. a good matchup. James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions, a national brand. A chance for Memphis to go in and get a win there. And you've elevated your profile a whole heck of a lot with or without your coach. And yes, there's December 28th. Not only do we have the college football semifinal games, we've got the Cotton Bowl game between Penn State and Memphis. And we've got the Camping World Bowl featuring Notre Dame versus Iowa State. Those will be your noon kickoffs. Good football.
Yeah.
Should be some fun stuff to watch. Cincinnati, let me look through my list of stuff here because there's so many bowl games, it's hard to keep track of them all. Excuse me.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at App State. I mean, they won the Sun Belt, so they're tied into going to the New Orleans Bowl. Good matchup against UAB, but I'd like to see App State against one of the big boys. They beat South Carolina. They beat North Carolina this year, so they've got some Power 5 scalps to put up there. And we don't know what, and we'll discuss a little later in the coaching carousel, Eli Drinkwitz's situation. You would like to see App State somewhere else than in New Orleans in a lesser bowl. It's going to draw maybe 25,000.
Yeah, and speaking of Cincinnati, they draw Boston College at the Ticket Smarter Birmingham Bowl at Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama on January 2nd.
I'm taking a road trip for us.
It's not far. It's only about 90 minutes away.
Again, BC 6-6. It just got rid of Steve Adazio. And they're getting their reward?
A game against
Birmingham.
Cincinnati? Yes. Woo! Hey,
Wow.
but yeah, the field's still being set. Most of the bowl games have already been announced. We'll have a show when we get closer to the kickoff of the bowl season, which is probably going to be next week, where we start going through the bowl games.
I'm loving that Michigan and Alabama are playing again in the postseason in Orlando.
Interesting.
That's becoming a yearly ritual.
Or at least a semi-yearly ritual.
Exactly.
Odd game. I've covered that game in the past. Never quite got a good vibe from that game for some reason. It just seems like, okay, we're here and we get to go to Disney World. Yay.
Well, shall we talk coaching carousel?
I think when we come back in the second block, maybe we should talk coaching carousel. Let's do that.
Let's do that. So when we come back, some new faces and new places. Some might be a little eyebrow raising. We'll discuss it as the review continues after this timeout.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
Thanks for tuning into the second block of the review. Before we get into the show, since we recorded, we had another coaching hire. Yeah, that's right. You'll hear us talk a little bit later in the show about Eli Drinkwitz heading to Missouri. Well, that actually happened after we got finished recording the show. So just making you aware of that. Doesn't change anything that we said. It doesn't change anything about what we think about him being a good fit for the team. Just kind of updating you and letting you know we haven't forgotten. Anyway, enjoy the second block of the review. There's a lot of coaching carousel stuff to talk about. Back to me and Wilkie in a pre-recorded segment. This is weird, isn't it?
Welcome back to the review. John Wilkerson here, Phil Cantor there. We've talked about the Final Four, talked about some of the bowl matchups. We talked about some of the championship games. Now we're going to talk about the carousel. Spin that carousel, Phil.
Enter the carousel. This is the time of renewal.
All right, let's start off in Oxford, Mississippi.
The headliner.
Lane Kiffin has landed in Oxford, Mississippi.
What do we have brewing here in Oxford, Mississippi?
How does this fit, Phil?
The Kiffin is back in Cincinnati. No, the Kiffin is back in Ole Miss. He's in Oxford. I think this is, I wouldn't say this is the boldest move. Lane Kiffin, former Florida Atlantic head coach, was in demand, and his name pretty much has appeared almost for every opening that there is this season. He was probably the biggest name of the coaches that was going to move someplace. It's an interesting fit. Ole Miss, a team that is for years, going on decades really, tried to make the leap over the Alabamas and LSUs and Auburns of the SEC West. They're going to have the coach to at least offensively try to get them to that level. Kiffin, say what you will about the guy, he knows how to get the most out of an offense, and he is about as cutting edge can be. You'll recall Alabama really hadn't made the leap to the 21st century offense until Kiffin showed up as the offensive coordinator for Nick Saban. Saban wasn't necessarily hugely on board with it, but he let Kiffin do his thing. Lo and behold, Alabama's a 21st century offense that can light up the scoreboard. There are some recruiting challenges that are inherent with Ole Miss, and he's certainly going to have a big hurdle to cross with that. But if you can get the athletes, you've got the guy on offense at least who can make Ole Miss at least a very intriguing program here over the next few years. It's a good hire. There's no downside to this, is there?
Well, there's sources out there saying that Ed Orgeron advised Lane Kiffin not to go to Oxford. He would know. Lane Kiffin in his presser credited Nick Saban for helping him land the gig.
So go to Oxford, no.
So there's no hard feelings between Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban there. How I read it is kind of Ole Miss kind of joining the 21st century of college football. They've always struck me as a program that stuck in the John Vaught era of the 50s and 60s. And they've just never, even when they've tried to have some success, they've just been blown away by recruiting violations. You go back even to the mid 80s with Billy Brewer and some of the shenanigans he did. And then obviously with Hugh Freeze, who had some great recruiting classes, but we found out why a few years later.
You ain't winning.
Exactly. So Lane Kiffin's going to come in with a fresh attitude, a fresh approach in a college campus in a sleepy little town that's still stuck in the 50s and 60s when Ole Miss was a power in the SEC, and they've kept that mantra ever since. So, whether the old timers are going to accept it, we'll see. I think it's really got some of the fan base excited in Oxford because it's just been stale. It's just been stale and boring. And it's just a big shot in the arm for Ole Miss. And of course, people thought that Lane Kiffin was ticketed for Arkansas because Hunter Yurachek had been AD at Arkansas, went down to Boca to talk to Lane Kiffin, and he's got ties because his dad was a defensive coordinator there in the Lou Holtz era. But Ole Miss, was aggressive, a lot more aggressive, and got the job done. So Lane Kiffin now finds himself in Oxford, and I think they're going to have some splash on the recruiting trail this year. Next year they may make a 6-6 and make a bowl, and after that we'll see. he didn't blow the Tennessee up his one and only year in Knoxville. He actually had a 7-5 and things going pretty well until USC came calling. So yeah, I think it's time for Kiffkins to get his shot in the SEC again.
Absolutely. I think it's a good move, and I don't see the downside for it. The other big name program looking for a coach, team that's been struggling over the last couple of years, and that's the Florida State Seminoles. They bagged their guy. We talked about him in the first block of the show. Mike Norvell signs on the dotted line and is moving to Tallahassee.
To the Florida State family, so very excited to be here. Absolutely appreciate the introduction and the welcome, and we got great days ahead of us. We need all of your support, and can't wait to shake all of your hands and see you out there in the very near future. And just so honored to be your head coach. Go Noles!
Yeah, and it's interesting. Mark Norvell's 41, and he's had great success in Memphis, and I think the concern about this hire is whatever his ties to Florida, which is he only had a few players from Florida to come to Memphis because you have to build a lot of relationships in those Florida high schools. And Florida State's recruiting profile is taking a little bit of hit in state. But this guy's an energetic coach, doesn't really show it on the field. But what I understand behind the scenes, he's pretty energetic and pretty into it. He had great success in Memphis. How is that going to translate to Florida State? He's going to a conference that's actually, to me, it's a little below the American, but he's got
absolutely.
He's got an opportunity there. He's going to a place where you can recruit superior talent. I think his reputation is impeccable among high school coaches. He has to translate that in Florida and South Georgia and Southern Alabama as well to get some of those players to come to Tallahassee. But I think this is the breath of fresh air that Florida State needs. And they need to let go of the end of the Jimbo Fisher era, realize their mistakes with Willie Taggart, and put all their energy behind Mike Norvell, because I think he's going to succeed in Tallahassee. Just think it's going to take a little time.
Yeah, I think probably the number one priority and the most important thing that Norvell could do walking into the door at Doak Campbell Stadium is his coaching staff. He needs to compete in Florida, in South Georgia, and South Alabama, in the fertile recruiting grounds that he's now finding himself in as a head coach. He needs that closer of a recruiting coordinator / assistant coach who can get him in the door at in almost any door in that tri-state, really that 3-state region. If he can do that, he's got the potential and has the skill set to make Florida State, bring them to where they think they should be, in an ACC that is wide open for somebody else to step up and challenge Clemson again. This is the perfect opportunity. I like the hire. He's not a Florida State guy. I'm not sure Florida State's going to get a Florida State guy who's qualified to take the job. In lieu of that, they could not do any better than what they did, considering how much money that they still have to pay off Willie Taggart to make him go away.
Well, no, I think they did a good job of bringing in Mike Norvell. I think he's going to calm some of the issues that have been going on in Tallahassee. He's not a guy that is charismatic. He's just a really good football coach. But this is a test for him now. He's got to make that program matter again, not only for the university, but for the ACC as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of ACC, there's an ACC opening that we mentioned earlier again in the show when we were talking about bowl games. That's Boston College. What do the Eagles do? I know it's a job that's not for everybody. There's got to be the right guy. I haven't really heard much discussion about options or potential.
They're keeping that pretty quiet. they're keeping that pretty quiet. And I think you're right. I mean, who fits that profile right now at BC? The one guy I can think of is in the conference, and that's Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. But it's a lateral move, and I think he can. Yeah, and I think he can win better at Wake than he could at BC. So, I mean, I haven't researched much on Boston College, what they're doing, but it's going to be a hard job for someone to go in there and do. I mean, watch their bowl game, or will they be interested in the bowl game? That's the thing. Missouri looks like they have zeroed in on Eli Drinkwitz. St. Louis Post-Dispatch is reporting that, and on their coaching search. I know there's been some. The Board of Regents at the University of Missouri has not been really thrilled about how Jim Sturk has gone around with this coaching search, but it looks like Drinkwitz is kind of the Appalachian State coach, is the guy that they're zeroing in. His name has been tied to Arkansas as well, but it looks like Missouri is is really kind of where Drinkwitz's attention is going. According to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, he's in Columbia, and they're going by everybody's doing Flight Tracker now on these coaching searches, and they're kind of going by that as
the December Flight Tracker season.
Exactly. He was in Columbia, but it's been confirmed to the Post-Dispatch that Missouri is pursuing Eli Drinkwitz. I think that would be great for that program. He's a really good coach. I've been around him a little bit when he was at NC State. Guy can develop quarterbacks, and that's what they need to do in Mizzou, is develop quarterbacks and have good offenses. He needs to have a strong defensive coordinator, but I think he's going to find that it's kind of difficult to win over a pretty jaded fan base, but this might be a good fit.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see that one. Missouri finds himself vaguely in a situation similar to Ole Miss that we talked about earlier in the block, in that they've got they're staring down Georgia, Florida, an improved Tennessee team over the course of the season. The hurdle for them is not a small one. While Drinkwitz had a great season at App State this year, maybe he is the guy who takes that step to the next level and surprises everybody and becomes the next great head coach. But right now, he doesn't have a long track record, and that's the question that I have. He did it a lot of what he did was with granted, yes, he was on Scott Satterfield's staff, but a lot of it was Satterfield's team. And I would want to see more of a track record from him, but Missouri thinks that they're in a position where they need to do something and make a big, bold move, and maybe he's the play for them.
You just wonder, though, why get rid of Barry Odom when that's the best you can do?
You're hire to replace him.
Right. Because I didn't think Barry Odom did a bad job at all. He had a lot of injuries this year, especially with Kelly Bryant. He got him bowl eligible, although they couldn't play in a bowl because of NCAA sanctions. So you got to wonder the thoughts of Jim Sturk when he decided to make the move, and whether it's worth it to chance with Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah, and that I think Sturk's running into what I think has been the one thing that nobody's really talked that much about during the early part of the carousel season, and that's that there hasn't really been that much change. There's not been a lot of high-profile jobs that have come open. Clay Helton ended up keeping his job at USC. That would have been easily the highest-profile job of them all.
And the dominoes would have fell from there.
Yeah, and because of that, there's not a whole lot of openings there. And then the other part of that is there's not really a whole lot of high-profile guys that can come in and change a program that are even available.
Yeah.
In order to make that kind of a dramatic change, if you're any one of these teams that we've talked about, you're going to have to kind of roll the dice and see if you can find that up-and-coming guy who just needs the opportunity and is able to take it to the next level without having the track record to prove it. That's a big risk.
Well, two guys I can think of offhand, then we'll discuss the Arkansas opening, that kind of fit that profile a little bit. Of not necessarily a program changer, but with the potential of doing that. And they're having success at the group of 5 level. One would be Josh Heupel at Central Florida, which I thought he would have been the top target for Missouri since he was the offensive coordinator there with Drew Lock. And maybe he just loves Orlando better than Columbia. I can't blame him for that. Billy Napier is the other one at Louisiana, which, you hear it, you see his names on these lists, but there's no movement at all. And is he happy in Lafayette? I'm sure he is. He probably wants to stay there a few more years to build more of a resume. Yeah, or maybe he's better opportunities, or maybe he knows something about Nick Saban's status at Alabama the next few years. I mean, who knows? He should be the head coach at Arizona State right now.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen. Now, Arkansas is a very similar one to Missouri. They've had that opening now for about a month now. So many names have been tied to that. It looked as if Lane Kiffin was going to be the guy. Obviously, Ole Miss had a better offer. We're hearing names. Eli Drinkwitz was up there. We saw him. Mike Norvell was there, but he quickly went down. The names we're hearing now is retaining Barry Lunny Jr. as the head coach, which personally for me would be okay. Butch Davis's name has now been mentioned as a possibility. He's a native of Springdale. He played at Arkansas for a year, and I know that was a job he wanted a long time ago. But at 68, 69 now, is this a Mac Brown scenario with Butch? But the name that is coming up to the top is Georgia assistant Sam Pittman, and ESPN is reporting now that he is, as well as some other sources, that he is the top candidate right now for Arkansas as its head coach. He was there with Brett Bielema a few years ago. He was very popular back in Fayetteville. He's put how many offensive line guys at Arkansas he put in the NFL and other places, and same with Georgia. So I think it's an interesting hire if this is the guy. I'm okay with it as an Arkansas guy. I'd be okay with it because I think this is what Arkansas is going to get. Pittman or Barry Lunny Jr. to me would be okay. Barry Lunny Jr. coming over to kind of be like a Dabo Swinney situation, potentially, knowing his demeanor, knowing his background. I've known the Lunny family for over 30 years. That's kind of what Arkansas is going to get. But we'll see what happens because I know no decisions have been made yet, and we'll see when a press conference will be announced.
I like the conversation about Pittman. I think the biggest thing, if you're an Arkansas fan or you're a supporter of the Razorback athletic program, is that football team is in such poor shape right now.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing to lose by going outside the box. Yeah. And hiring Sam Pittman would be a step a little bit outside the box because you're looking at a guy who is just an absolute knockdown, spectacularly good recruiter and offensive line coach, but no head coaching experience. If he can translate what he does in terms of getting kids to buy into what he's selling and doing, you've got the makings of potential good head coach. And I know we just talked about a little while ago about Drinkwitz's wanting to see a track record, but him going to Missouri is a different fit than having Pittman go to Arkansas. Missouri program's in a little bit of a different place than Arkansas is at the current time. I think the potential there could be great. I think Butch Davis going to Arkansas is kind of funny, but that's a whole other conversation. But I think Sam Pittman's a fantastic football coach. Everybody that has ever talked about him anywhere in a public forum has said nothing but awesome things about him. It would hurt the University of Georgia to lose him, and he's the highest paid offensive line coach in college football today at $900,000 a year.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a fantastic hire for Arkansas, to be quite honest. And I don't know enough about Barry Lunny to really make an opinion one way or the other. I don't know his track record as an assistant.
He is a Razorback to the core. He was a quarterback there, obviously. His father is Barry Lunny Sr. was a fantastic head coach in the high school level in Arkansas, won many state championships at Fort Smith Southside and at Bentonville. So he comes from that pedigree. Watching him those last two games reminded me so much of his father. Very matter-of-factly, no nonsense, but those guys responded to his coaching. And yeah, he didn't win games, but you got to admit the effort out there for the last two against LSU and Missouri was a lot better. What was hampered is the fact that there's just no quarterback there. No quarterback with any kind. No quarterback with any confidence on that team. They've been beaten down all year. Nobody knew when they were starting. Nobody knew, really the game plan for the day because they're being interchanged. I think he did a good job of kind of calming all that down. But he's a native son. He is, like I say, he's a Razorback to the core. I think he's probably as smart as anybody football-wise. He's ready for his coaching opportunity. And again, potentially, this could be a Dabo Swinney situation for Arkansas. Dabo Swinney was a wide receivers coach at Clemson when the hammer came down on Tommy Bowden in midseason. He got his opportunity. Did well. Terry Don Phillips, an Arkansas guy, who was the AD at Clemson at the time, recognized that, gave him the job full time. And what has happened since? To me, the demeanors of the two are very similar. Barry Lunny's not as charismatic as Dabo Swinney is, but he could be if he's a head coach at an SEC school. So either one of those hires would be good for me. I'm glad they're not looking at Mike Leach or even Lane Kiffin wasn't going to come, because you're getting a road show then. And we need Arkansas needs a football coach. And Sam Pittman and Barry Lunny Jr. would be football coaches that could get it done.
Yeah.
And of course, while we're taping our segment here on the review, breaking news, Sam Pittman appears to be the new head coach at Arkansas.
Yeah, we talked about it here, and then lo and behold, by the time we hit stop on the record button, it happened.
Multiple sources are reporting that Pittman has agreed to become Arkansas's new head coach. This is kind of in the beginning stages here, but as we mentioned earlier, he's a very popular coach, great recruiter, and he was on Brett Bielema's staff for 3 seasons as the offensive line coach at Arkansas, and he put many O-linemen from Arkansas in the NFL.
Yeah, and as I'm monitoring Twitter here while we talk, it's starting to come out that it's going to be the real deal. It's going to happen. Good move. I like it. Arkansas needed to make an outside the box change, as I talked about earlier. This is definitely an outside the box change. He's a great personality. He's a tough guy. He's a guy who will get in your face and get guys to motivate and get the best out of them. There's nothing bad about this hire. This is a great move on the part of the Arkansas Razorbacks. It's funny because I touched on it there before we got too deep into that conversation. Really, if you look at the list of coaching changes, the potential options and coaches that are out there, there's, outside of the name Lane Kiffin and the aura that he brings around him, there's nothing out there that screams excitement and says, oh my God, we've got to have him running our program. Oh my God, he's going to make us the greatest team ever.
Yeah, well, that's because Urban Meyer doesn't want to coach anymore in the college level. Neither does Bob Stoops. And those guys would probably be qualified for that, what you just said, Phil. But Stoops is going to coach in the XFL. So that interests him more. And I think Urban Meyer, if he's going to coach again, I think he's looking toward the NFL.
Yeah.
And of course, the Dallas Cowboys, or somebody in that organization is making some kind of noise that that's who they want as the head coach of the Cowboys. And apparently he wouldn't turn it down. So I can see where perhaps that's the case, that he's eyeing more to an NFL position than staying in the college football. So there's your two big names that you got to have, and they're just not interested.
I look forward to seeing how it plays out here over the next couple of weeks. You want to go ahead and wrap up the show here for this week? And
yeah, let's wrap it up.
Tease ahead and tell everybody that we'll talk about bowl games next week.
Yeah, by then we should know who the bowl games are, and we'll go over that. We'll talk Army-Navy. We'll know who the Heisman Trophy winner is. I think right now we already know who the Heisman Trophy winner is, and he resides in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Where's
and
number 9?
Where's number 9? And he can change his name to the Cajun vernacular if he has to, at least the spelling. So we'll talk about that among many things with the review. Phil, I know you'll be fired up to write a few columns on theonlinesportsguys.com. And, of course, we have our other content out there as well, soccer. So check us out. And we appreciate you listening to us on our host site, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple iTunes, Stitcher Radio, BarnBurner.ca, Google Play, SoundCloud, and on our phone app at OSG Sports on your Apple or Android device. So, say goodbye, Phil.
Goodbye, Phil.
I'm John Wilkerson. Enjoy the games next weekend.